Everyone, are we ready? Good morning and ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to day 2 of the Vibe Martech Fest by Martech Vibe and our presenting partner Sprinkler. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Aziza Razak Berdiva. I'm a keynote speaker, fulfillment coach, presenter, and I will be your host today. After a highly engaging and successful day 1, we are elated to have you all in an equally exciting and content-rich day of 2 of the summit. Apart from an impressive lineup of speakers that we've got for you, we also have the Vibe Martech Awards and the inaugural of Women in Martech Awards to look forward to. Both awards honor the best in business and celebrate their achievements. Also, we have a fun surprise performance for you just before the award ceremony, so you make sure you don't miss that. Before we start our day 2, I would also like to thank all our partners who have been aligned with the Vibe Martech Fest and invested a lot in bringing this community of leaders together under one roof. A big thank you to Sprinkler for being our presenting partner and being at the forefront of the Martech and CX narrative in the region. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Salesforce, Gold Partner, Telium, Sitecore, Zoho, and WebEngage. Our silver sponsors, CleverTap, ObservePoint, Branch, and Netcore. Our associate sponsor, AppsFlyer, Epsilon. Our bronze sponsor, Merkle, and our networking sponsor, American Eagle. Now, I would like to remind you to kindly keep your masks on for your health and safety, and also please keep your phones on silent mode. Our next speaker for the day is a name I'm sure everyone in this room has heard of. His name is Sir Martin Sorrell. He's the founder and executive chairman of S4 Capital PLC, a new age, purely digital advertising and marketing services business for global, multinational, regional, local clients, as well as millennial-driven influencer brands. He built the WPP from a wire basket to the world's largest advertising, PR, and marketing group in the world. After a little over 2 years, S4 Capital PLC has over 5,000 people in 31 countries across the globe, with a market capitalization of almost 4 billion. Sir Martin, he supports a number of leading organizations, schools, and universities, amongst which are Harvard Business School, Cambridge University, and a number of charities through his family organization. He's joining us virtually today from London. So please welcome and give a round of applause to Sir Martin Sorrell.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm very glad to be able to address you all at the Vibe Martech Fest, which is hosted by Martech Vibe. So look forward to this session. And I thought I might start by talking a little bit about what's been happening this year. Actually, it's almost coming up to 2 years since the pandemic, since COVID-19 struck, and it struck everybody, although it struck us unequally. Those with resources obviously were able to deal with COVID and the pandemic much more efficiently and effectively than those who didn't have the resources. So it's really affected people unequally. And I think one of the things that we'll be living with for many years is the differential impact on the developed economies and what I call the fast growth economies, such as India and such as China, and such as those in South America and the Middle East and Africa, which probably will take longer to recover. And COVID really struck people unequally at the end of the day and impacted people in the long term, I think, unequally. But in any event, obviously the marketing landscape has been heavily affected, to say the least, by what's been happening. And what we've seen at S4, and we've been in a lucky position, I guess, either by luck or judgment, we've chosen to focus totally 100% on digital marketing and focus on the growth in digital marketing, because as you know, digital crossed 50% of the worldwide media markets, which are around $650 billion this year, dollars. Marketing services around 500 billion, and trade budgets around 800 billion. So all in all, the addressable market for S4 in content and data and analytics and digital media is about 1.7, 1.8 trillion. Growing last year, we at S4 grew organically 20%. This year, we've indicated to the market, we started at 25%. We said we upped it to 30 and 35, and we're announcing our results for the half year on September the 13th, and we'll give you some more information on that guidance. We even take it up again then, guidance for the full year. But basically, we've committed to doubling the size of the company over 3 years, from 21 to 23, as we did in 19 to 21, and we said in 20 to 22, and we'll do in that period of time. So we're growing at well over 25% per annum, and this year the industry will grow by, the digital part of the industry will grow by 20%. I think one of the things really to understand, first off, is that there are really two industries. It's the tale of two cities. There's a growth digital industry, and there's a no growth or slow growth traditional industry. You see that in the results of the ad holding companies, as they're called. I mean, they talk about growth in Q2 of 21, and we talk about Q2 of 21 being their best quarter ever, but they omit to mention that Q2 of 2020 was their worst ever. And when you look at it overall, the 2-year stack of 21 compared to 20 and 19, there's no growth there, or very slow growth. And obviously, 21 and 22, we're going to see significant GDP growth. GDP growth this year will be something like 5 to 6% globally, and next year 4 to 5%. You have to go back to the 1970s and 80s, and I'm old enough to do that, to find 2 years of sequential GDP growth at that sort of level without inflation. We've had very little inflation so far, although it's signs of more inflation creeping in, and I think it will be more permanent than temporary, as some people are predicting. I think it will be more permanent. But in any event, you have to go back an awfully long way to find 2 years of GDP growth at these levels with very little inflation. So the basic background, if you're in digital, in that growth area of the market, or that growth industry, as opposed to the slow growth or no growth part of the industry in traditional, the prospects are extremely good. But we have seen very significant changes in the last year, 2 years. And it's affected really three communities. Consumers, I mean, consumers for the first time are buying goods and essentials and food online for the first time. I remember in the very early days of the pandemic, in March and April of last year, there were statistics flying around that 30% of US consumers were consuming essentials and food for the first time online. We're educating our kids online. We're connecting with financial services online. We're connecting with all forms of products and goods online for the first time. And once those patterns of behavior have changed, they're unlikely to change again. We saw that with SARS in China. I remember Alan Jope at Unilever saying that the changes that they saw with the Chinese consumer as a result of SARS didn't go back to where they were. So that's one change. The second change is in the media itself. Here we are online at a conference. So live events have become hybrid events, sometimes totally virtual. But as we come out of the pandemic, please God, as we come out of it, we'll see more hybrid, whether that's working from home and the way we work, but also the way we meet and consume. I mean, we all thirst for face-to-face contact, and we all know how important it is, particularly for the young people in our organizations, or the people who are joining our organizations for the first time. And you can take S4 as an example. We've gone from about 2,400 people this time last year to 6,000. About half of that growth has come through organic growth and half through adding on companies. But essentially, we brought together this community of 6,000 people with half of them at least not having met one another. So obviously we worry about that. But importantly, media has changed. That's the second area, has changed too. We see it with the growth of the streamers, Netflix and Disney Plus. Disney Plus launched at a time when the pandemic was probably at its worst, and yet it's probably the most successful new product introduction, one of them, that we've ever seen, and rivaling Netflix for subscriber numbers and growth and penetration. We've seen traditional newspapers and magazines decline even faster, and their digital counterparts rise even faster. We've seen online outdoor outpace traditional outdoor. So you've seen big changes, not just with consumers, but with media too. And finally, enterprises, companies have changed. The change agents inside companies, the people who've been thirsting for digital transformation, digital change, have been given more oxygen as a result of what happened in the pandemic. In Q2 of 2020, a big hole was blown in the profitability of most companies. And what they've done in response is to change even faster. The barriers, the lethargy has been removed by the speed of change the pandemic has brought on, and all the barriers to change within companies have been brought down. Not all of them, but many have been brought down as those change agents get to work. So we've seen big changes across consumer behavior, across behavior inside media and enterprises. So another question that a lot of people ask is, given those changes, how do you adapt to grow? How do legacy companies adapt to change in that sort of environment? I think there are probably three things that you want to think about. The first is that this much misused word, misquoted word, agility, flexibility, responsiveness. We go to market at S4 as faster, better, cheaper. And the faster piece of that slogan is about agility. And agility is the key corporate attribute, not just during COVID, before COVID, but particularly after COVID. Agility and adaptability is really, really important. A lot of CEOs and CMOs and CIOs and CTOs talk about agility, but their ability to get their organizations to change swiftly is often very difficult, particularly if you're an analog company trying to change to a digital company. You see that with the holding companies. When I was at WPP, I used to talk about horizontality. I know that's a banned word now, but that was a fairly crude way of getting people to think about how you build one firm as opposed to multiple silos and multiple verticals. That's the critical issue. We at S4 are trying, if I put it in a grand way, to become a McKinsey or Goldman in the sense of one brand. And that gives us the agility, gives us the ability to enable our clients to access the 6,000 digital experts that we have in 33 countries. So the first thing I would say is agility within organizations is a critical component. You see it much more agility in the first generation tech companies, those companies like S4 that have started with a clean sheet of paper. It's very difficult when you have an analog company, trying to change that base. It's often a cash cow, a profitability cash cow that feeds the growth and development of the digital part of the operation. But it's very difficult to get that balance and get there. So agility is number one. The second thing I would say is using Dominic Cummings' slogan for winning the referendum and the general election. Although Dominic Cummings is now out, it was the slogan that put Boris Johnson in the position that he is in relation to Brexit and the general election. Take back control. Simple slogan. And I think marketeers have lost control of the marketing process, particularly after 2008, the great financial crisis. It became very fashionable to talk about cost control, zero-based budgeting. And that's been really disproved by what happened. We've seen a number of the ZBB companies, the zero-based budgeting companies, focusing on eliminating cost rather than building top-line growth. And you build top-line growth through innovation, that's key, and branding. To be fair, you can have innovation without branding, but you can't have branding without innovation. The two go together. What ZBB did was to throttle innovation, and to throttle the investment in branding was critically important. So I think taking back control, and in that environment, what happened was marketers tended to outsource a lot of their activity to agencies or consultants or whatever. And I think that was a terrible mistake, because in a 24/7 always on world, going back to flexibility and agility and responsiveness, that's absolutely key. No longer can you spend a few weeks briefing an agency, getting the agency to come in and talk about response to the brief, coming up with a solution. What you have to do is to move at nano speed, to move at hyper speed, and to implement extremely quickly. And it may not be perfectly. You may have to, we talk about at S4, we talk about the fusion of data with content, data and analytics with content and digital media. We talk about the Holy Trinity. That is, we get the data, we create the content, we produce the content, we distribute it through digital media, we look at the response, and we refine the creative on the basis of the response. For example, work that we do for Netflix, we might produce 1.6 million different personalized executions for Narcos or Narcos 3 or whatever it is. Use maybe 50 to 70,000, but you're continually refining. And in that sort of environment, when you have that sort of model, it's very important that you have much more control of the process that you did in the old days. That 24/7 always on environment demands it. So the second thing is take back control. And the third thing I would emphasize is the importance of first party data. With Google taking the position that it's taken on third party data, on cookies, and the importance of first party data has been heightened by that. What Google has done and what Apple have done with IDFAs on the Apple iPhone mean that control of first party data, well, not so much control, but use of first party data, consumer consented to, dealing with the privacy issues, consumers consented data, pooling that data, making sure it talks to one another, that the data lakes, whatever the right analogy is, they flow into one another in the most effective way. That is absolutely critical. And that will be the battleground. Now, Google have postponed the implementation of the elimination of third-party cookies for a couple of years, but essentially that is going to drive the growth of the importance of first-party data, linking all together. We've seen in our business, in our data and analytics and our digital media practice, which is 1/3 of our business at S4 Capital, we've seen a huge increase in demand as a result of it. So I would say that the key issues to think about, the takeaways from this exchange with you, are about agility, about taking back control, and the importance of using first-party data, pooling it, understanding it, and using it in the most effective way, because that's the data source, together with the signals of the platforms, together with the signals from Google, from Facebook, from Amazon, from Tencent, from Alibaba, from TikTok. These are these are the pieces of data, your own data plus the signals that have become critically important. So given all that, what should be your top priority? Well, obviously I'm biased, I'm highly subjective, but putting more money, more investment, and more measurement into the digital areas is critically important. We've seen phenomenal growth at S4 organically. It truly has been unprecedented. I mean, this is not nonsense around the Q2 recovery in 2021 from 2020. This is not a dead cat bounce as you're seeing in the ad holding companies. This is genuine secular growth, driven by digital transformation, not driven by fiscal and monetary stimulus, the impact of COVID last year, and then the stimulus this year. This is well-grounded secular growth that is driving. Given that, further investment in digital is absolutely critical. It's currently, as I said, around 50% of the digital media market, of the marketing services market, of the trade budgets. It will be 70% by 2024, we think. Will go to become even more important over time. But the importance of investing more heavily in digital media, which are more easier to measure. The techniques that you have are much more effective in terms of measuring the response. And that's why we saw in the pandemic the switch from traditional, even last year when traditional was down by 10 or 15%, digital was growing by 5 or 10%, depending on who you believe. Because this year has resumed that 20% industrial pattern. We're growing faster, but that industrial pattern that we've seen it. So given all that, the increase in investment in digital, what are the challenges that companies face with dealing with digital natives and shrinking markets, particularly the analog companies? How do they shift to digital? Well, I remember Hubert Joly at Best Buy, he's now chairman of Best Buy, ex-McKinsey consultant, moved from the hospitality industry to the retail industry. Very difficult industry, obviously, to go from analog to digital. And he said, everybody said to him in the first 6 months as CEO of Best Buy, it was about change management. And after about 6 months, he realized it was about change management, so he changed all management. And I think that's the heart of what needs to be done. You have to change, you have to have rapid and fundamental organizational change in analog companies to get to the digital space. And we were very lucky at S4 in a way that we started 3 years ago, it's only 3 years ago, with a clean sheet of paper. We built now a company that's approaching $6 billion in terms of market capitalization in 3 years. And we've done that because we've been in a very fortunate position, being in the right place at the right time, skating to where the puck's going, as Wayne Gretzky said, rather than where it is now, and being fortunate, really, in a way. I mean, if I can say that, we were in the right place at the right time. But for analog companies, it really is about significant management change. And we're obviously, as a result of all this, we're seeing the growing importance of technology. We at S4 are not an ad tech or martech company. We're not part of the technology layer. When we say faster, better, cheaper, we're agility. The cheaper bit is being efficient in at least until now, a zero inflation world, because our clients have very little pricing power. But better really means understanding. It doesn't mean developing the technology. It means understanding technology. So our role is we're part of the service layer. We're not an ad tech or martech company. Our role is fundamentally to understand the relative merits, the strengths and weaknesses, the advantages and disadvantages of the hardware companies, the software companies, and the platforms. And it's worth me listing who most of those companies are. Obviously, the 6 big platforms, 3 Western, Google, Facebook, Amazon, 3 Eastern, Tencent, Alibaba, TikTok, ByteDance. TikTok, by the way, is the only one that's really got into the same level that we've seen with the other platforms I mentioned. I mean, Google is going to go probably in ad revenues this year from about 180 billion to 240 billion. Facebook from about 80 to 110 billion. And Amazon 25 to 35 billion. TikTok, as best as we can understand, is doing about 32 billion. We did that last year. Don't quite know what Alibaba and Tencent are doing, but it's very significant, obviously, particularly in the Chinese market and the outbound markets. But essentially, those 6 platforms dominate, and they will add, actually, interestingly, about 100 billion alone. So if the media markets this year are about 650 billion, 100 billion of that is going to come from those 3 platforms I mentioned, from Google, Facebook, or growth from Google, Facebook, and Amazon. So they are by far the strongest platforms. And then beyond that, you go, obviously, Apple and Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce, Adobe, IBM, SAP, Twitter, Snap, Pinterest, LG, Samsung, Spotify, Netflix, JD.com, Xiaomi, epic we're building in New Delhi. We had built. Robbie and Poran have built the Unreal Engine studio, the underlying technology underpinning Epic and Fortnite. That technology is extremely good, revolutionary in creating content from anywhere in the world in our studio in New Delhi. We took over the studio that used to be CNBC's TV18, Mukesh Ambani's studio there, and we've invested a little bit of money in building one of the world's leading, if not the world's leading, Unreal Engine studio for creating high resolution content from anywhere in the world from New Delhi. So it's really using the technology and understanding how the technology is ebbing and flowing. I mean, we're not tied to any one system, any one hardware company or software company or platform. But what we're tied to is understanding the difference. So the impact of technology in marketing is critically important. So enough from me. Let me just turn to you. And I've had a number of questions as I've been speaking. I've got 3 questions I've been asked, amongst many others. Happy to answer any that you have. My email is martin@s4capital.com. So just to prove that there are people out there watching and listening to this, it'd be nice to establish a dialogue with them. The first question is, will too much data and analytics hamper creativity? And I think the simple answer to that is no, it won't. It will inform creativity. A lot of our people in our industry look at the industry through rose-tinted spectacles, in my view. It's a bit like Don Draper. They hark back to a romantic era of Birnbach and Ogilvy, and that was a romantic era, and it was a great era. But today's era is different. Just as I said, take back control is important. And we have 3 models at S4. We have the traditional outsourcing model. We have the embedded model, where we put our people into the client. They look as though they're the client's employees, but they're ours. And then we have the in-house model. We're not frightened to do ourselves out of a job. If we believe it's in the client's interest to do so, we will do so. We will invest with our clients in making sure that they have the capabilities. In that 24/7 always on world, you often have to do that. So it's the 3 models. It doesn't work everywhere. There are a couple of issues with in-housing. Can you keep up to date with technology, and can you keep your people? And there is a lot of churn, I think, when you go to in-housing, but we're prepared to work with the clients in order to make that true. So I think data and analytics really informs creativity and makes it much more effective. And I think that romantic notion of, where you walk into a room, you have an idea, the client goes for it with intuition and with that gut feel, not a bad thing. And I'm sure our people would like to work with clients that are instinctive, but we shouldn't be frightened of data. Data can inform, give us insights. Unbelievable campaign that Media Monks did in Italy. That was on the inside from Facebook, that women spent on average 1.7 seconds on a post. So what did? We created 2-second ads. So I think what you have to do is use creativity use data to make creativity much more effective. The second question, will technology make all parties accountable in the process more transparent? Yes, I think it will. And I think one of the problems we see in India, one of the problems we see in China, in Japan, in many other markets, in Brazil, in Mexico, is a lack of transparency. I mean, it was very controversial at the time, but when the ANA in America, Association of National Advertisers, and K2 and Ubiquity started their investigation into rebates and so-called kickbacks. I mean, whilst nothing was proven, it was, at the end of the day, I think with the exception of something around Havas in Ad Age that appeared about they mistakenly accredited discounts or in some part of their organization, with that one exception, nothing was proven. But it created this sort of nasty smell around the industry and this lack of transparency. We at S4 have a totally transparent model. It's a totally open book. We believe that is the right way. And I still, even 4 or 5 years after the ANA instituted their investigations, we still, I still encounter concerns among clients about lack of transparency. So I think transparency is critically important in our industry and to clients. And I think technology has made the system more accountable. We will see with blockchain, not clever enough to figure out the whys and wherefores of Bitcoin, but certainly the blockchain, the underlying blockchain technology will enable us to understand the digital ecosystem even more effectively and will increasingly eliminate fraud and lack of transparency. So I think it does help. The final question, I'll be glad to hear, is it's true, I follow Warren Buffett very closely and read as much of what he says as possible, because he reads an awful lot, and I've been asked to recommend one book. Well, I'll recommend you two. Amazon Unbound would be one, which is about the growth of Jeff Bezos's company, Amazon, which actually interesting. I see Google's market cap is slightly better, I think, than Amazon at the moment, as Google heads towards 2 trillion, following Apple. But Amazon Unbound is about the growth of Amazon, Jeff Bezos's empire. Of course, he's building another empire now in space. But I think it's written by Brad Stone, and it's an interesting analysis of the rise of Amazon and the pluses and minuses around Amazon. That's one. And the second book is Doom by Neil Ferguson. I call him Niall, gets upset. It's Neil Ferguson. And obviously he's writing about what has happened in history, historian, at times of crisis, and the sort of crises that we've had with COVID-19, and of course with the similar situation that we had towards the end of the First World War with the Spanish flu. So looking at crises and those difficulties in the context, in historical context. So I think it puts COVID-19 in historical perspective. So just a few thoughts on what you might read when you get a moment. But just to finish, I feel very optimistic about what's happening in our industry. And again, I emphasize our industry is the digital industry. It's not the traditional advertising business. It's that more than half of that 1.7, 1.8 trillion. And you'll see us make a move into technology services shortly to complement our content and our data and analytics and digital media activities. But I'm very bullish about that industry for two reasons. One is the basic underlying GDP growth for 2021 and 22 is very strong, driven by this inordinate fiscal stimulus, and it keeps on coming. I mean, President Biden has passed his $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill through the House of Representatives. We'll have to get through the Senate, but it's amazing the amounts of money that have been pumped in. I think the world's economy is about 72, 73 trillion. And we must have seen, ignoring that $3.5 trillion in relation to the infrastructure bill, we must have seen somewhere 10, 12, 13, 14 being pumped into the world's economy. So 21, GDP growth of 5 to 6%, 22, 4 to 5%. I worry about what happens after that. In 23, it's likely worldwide GDP growth will go back to its pre-COVID levels of 2 to 3%. I worry about inflation, and I worry about our ability to pay for all this fiscal and monetary stimulus. Some will call it largesse. I don't think it was largesse, but it was needed in order to take us out of the impact of this terrible, devastating COVID-19, which you in India in particular have seen and seen the impact of, as I said at the very beginning, in my view, unequally and unjustifiably. So it was needed to do that. So that's the first thing that's happening. The second thing is this wave of digital transformation. The pandemic has driven the pace of change at hyperspeed. It's changing in a nanosecond. And whether it be amongst consumers, as I've said, or amongst media, amongst enterprise. And that's where I really am optimistic about S4 and its prospects, because that's the secular. The first thing I mentioned about GDP was cyclical. The second, the secular tailwind is huge, and that is the growth of the importance of digital transformation. We're historically in our first 3 years focusing on CMOs and chief sales officers. We will, as I mentioned, be moving into technology services, which will enable us to do that, not just through the marketing and sales function, but the other function that gets affected by digital transformation and change, that is the IT function. And so we will be able to attack digital transformation through the CTOs and CIOs and meet in the middle, if you like, with the CEOs, CFOs, and chief procurement officers who basically implement digital transformation and change. So thank you once again. Enjoyed my session with you. At least I did. I hope you out there enjoyed it too. And as I said, any of you any questions or follow up, Martin at s4capital.com. I'd be delighted to try and answer your questions or respond to any observations. So good luck.
Thank you so much, Sir Martin, for addressing and inspiring our audience today. Definitely the right start to the day here in Dubai, right?